Hey, welcome back to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel, we have Dan Shapir,
Hello from a Tel Aviv at war.
Steve Edwards,
Buenos dias from a cold and clear Portland area.
AJ O'Neill,
Yo, coming at you live. Yeah, that's it. Just coming at you live.
We are coming at you live. We are
Yeah.
streaming. I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. I don't have a nifty from line.
From the
lots
green
of new stuff
background.
coming.
You're
Yeah,
from the green background.
I'm going to start using that too and streaming with the green screen. But
A green
Yeah.
shirt, but then you should probably change your green shirt.
I should, because it will disappear into the. Anyway,
Look like a floating
you
head.
can make it. You can make it.
Floating
work.
talking head, right?
you can and you can't. It would blend a lot. Anyway, we have a special guest this week. That's SaltyAom. SaltyAom. I'll just call you Ohm. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello from Thailand. So, my name is Om. It's kind of hard to pronounce, but that's how you pronounce it. So basically, I am open source developer, maintainer of Elysia, and working at the guild. If you're familiar with like GraphQL, your call something like that, that's like what people from where I'm working at created or something like that. But yeah, so overall, that's it.
I would like to point out for the record that it is approximately 1:40 in the morning his time, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Oh wow.
So, I'm just gonna jump in here and say some stuff, mainly because like Elysia or Elysium, it's from literature actually. And anyway, I remember reading Divine Comedy with where they go on the Elysian fields, and anyway, cool stuff. But that's not what we're talking about. What is ElysiaJS? Do you want to just give us kind of the 10,000 foot view?
Let's start with the name first. So about the name, there's like a word called like Elysia, right? So it's kind of some literature that I read when I was like younger, maybe like 10 or 11 or sometimes around that. And if I recall correctly, it's like a very nice story about something about love or something like that, or something like that. But I just like forgot how all of the thing went, but I remember that I liked it a lot. So when I was like working on some stuff, I usually tend to like, oh, I remember that I like this word a lot, and there's like some story behind it. Maybe I forgot it, but that's fine. I only like remember that I like this word a lot, so I just like put it on there. But on the technical side, Elysia is like a backend framework for like front-end developers, which kind of weird because like before I get into backend, I was front-end developer before get into the backend, and I found that the backend is like kind of hard because like in the front end we have like a lot of toolings like TypeScript bundling step or something like that, and in the backend we don't have like some tooling to like improve the kind of like developer experience a lot. So when I was like starting with backend, I kind of like very frustrated over Express, Spotify, and Nest.js. I found that it's quite hard to like setting thing up. So I just like want to create something that is like maybe a little bit easier and like borrow some term from front-end development that can make like front-end developer feel at ease or something like that. That's why I create something like if you are familiar with gRPC, there's like a server library and a client library that allow you to like use server, allow you to like get some type from server and use it on client, which like simplify a lot of data calling model like fetch over network. A lot of that it is like it's like simplify a lot of things, and it's like calling just a function and then you you do some networking stuff in the between, and then it just magically appear in the front end. That's like that's how I start building this stuff. But that's overall.
So I have to just make a comment on the name as well. First of all, if anybody saw Gladiator, the movie,
Mhm.
it's actually mentioned there because the Elysium Field was like the Roman Valhalla. It's like where you
Right.
went when you died, like this sort of a grassy heaven. It was portrayed in the movie. And the other benefit of picking that name is that you managed to score ElysiaJS.com, which is not obvious for a lot of open source projects. A lot of developer projects have to settle for .dev or .io or something like that. So good,
Hey, there's
good
no
for you.
settling for .dev. .dev's awesome.
Yeah, but Control
I'm with Dan
Enter,
on this one. You're better off
Control
with the
Enter
.com.
still goes to .com, so that rules. Um, but the second on the technical part, you kind of manage to say a lot of stuff in a really short time. So because you mentioned the fact that you were looking to create a kind of a replacement for Express and Fastify, and you also mentioned TRPC and type safety. So there's a lot to unpack in what you said really quickly. So maybe we'll do it a little bit more slowly.
Okay.
So so the first thing that I want to start with is you mentioned that it's an alternative to um to Express and to what's the other one? Is it Fastify Fastly? I'm always confused by I always forget what's the name exactly. AJ, you probably remember.
Fastify is the one that's far too complicated for the performance that it gives you when you could have used something else instead.
Ah,
But
okay.
I was on Team Fastify for a while.
Okay. So my first question is this. Given that Express rules so much of web development on top of Node, it's what's the motivation for creating yet another alternative for it? Like, why isn't Express or Fastify or one of the other alternatives good enough? Why do we need another one?
Hmm. That's a good question. So currently, if you know like Vercel or Netlify or Cloudflare function, they are using a different standard from how Node HTTP work, which Express and Fastify is built on. So if you want to use Express on Cloudflare Worker, you have to like add some config or add some Node.js additional layer or something like that on like Vercel 8 function and Netlify function. They add some node compatibility to make it work, and they know also does the same, but they actually use the different API. Like they have a standard called WinterCG, which a lot of runtime try to unite together and create one standard that to make the JavaScript framework behave all the same on for making the request uh, on making HTTP requests. They are called Web Standard API, and they use something called like new request and new response. New response. If you are familiar with Next.js, they have an API root, and then in the API root, you can create something called new response. That new response is the same standard as using in WinterCG. So when you create some framework that based on this, it allow you to make a framework run on any runtime without overhead for converting from Node HTTP into like web standard back and forth. So it's like the standard is going to be like implemented a lot on many runtime, and Express and Falsified is implemented on Node HTTP, but not on this new standard. So there's like some new framework like Hono and Elysia that's trying to implement it, the re- in, that try to implement the framework based on this standard. But that's it.
So rather than building on existing ad hoc Node APIs, you're using the quote unquote, well, not really quote unquote, the standard APIs that are provided by the Winter CG.
Yes.
Is that what I'm understanding? And that makes it possible to run Elysia on any Winter CG compatible platform without the need for any sort of a compatibility layer that adds overhead and complexity, correct?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
In that case, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is when I look at the Elysia website, the ElysiaJS.com, I see that it very explicitly states that it's intended for bun. So that kind of contradicts, it seems to me, like the statement that it's compatible potentially with any Winter CG compatible platform. So is it for bun, or is it recommended for bun, or is it only for bun? Like what's the attitude here?
Mhm. So, actually, Elysia is designed to be run on Bun at first, but then we found that Bun also use the Winter CG standard, which allowed us to like expand the API to another runtime as well. But at the first, so currently we are on like almost to the we still in an very early stages, but technically we tried uh there's like a runtime different in for performance for each code. For example, in Node.js, they are using V8, right? V8 engine to run the JavaScript, but in Bun they are using JavaScript core. So there's like some area that uh some code tend to run faster in JavaScript core and some code tend to run faster in V8. So Elysia try to like run a lot, have a lot of code and pick the code, and then we benchmark the code and benchmark the code in each runtime and pick what is fastest in JavaScript core and put it into the framework. So basically, we are optimized for running in JavaScript core, but the performance doesn't like different a lot on each runtime. So technically, it's like it is meant to be like run on JavaScript core, but the code also run the same in other runtime as well. It is just like faster in JavaScript core because it is meant to be run on there. But based on Winter CG standard that we are building, it allowed us to expand to like other runtime that I mentioned. But in the currently, we have some plugin like maybe file system for like serving static file. So for the first class plugin that we are building especially for Bun, and then we provide what is called like the second tier support for Node.js and Cloudflare Worker. But in the main environment that we are running, we are testing on Bun mostly.
So my
So
understanding is that V8 is for desktop. It was designed by Google for desktop for long running applications where you get a lot of benefit out of JIT. And JavaScript core was designed for mobile where things need to run very quickly the first time, and JIT isn't as important as just as soon as you get the code, run the code. So I understand why the two would be different. You gonna do a micro benchmark on one line of code over here versus one line of code over here, and you're gonna get better performance on one versus the other because they are V8 is going to be slower up front, but faster over time. JavaScript core is going to be faster in a one shot. And that's what these edge functions and edge platforms are geared towards is they're one shots. So I know that Winter CG could technically apply to any runtime, but in practice, is Winter CG going to be JavaScript core like Netlify, Vercel, etc.?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So it's not just Bun and it's not just Winter CG. It's that there's an ecosystem here where they pretty much all are going to use JavaScript core and they're pretty much all going to use Winter CG. So you're playing to that benefit. And there's no chance that Node would ever do as well because a Node application just is never going to be able to be tuned for Winter CG because Node is running on V8.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Although I do have to ask myself when I'm thinking about the code that you're writing, maybe you can give a concrete example of where you see such a difference. I mean, which code do you write that does any sort of processing that a
Mm.
certain optimization gets it to run faster in core and a different type of optimization gets it to run faster in V8?
Hmm. Okay. Let's start with my most favorite one. So if you're familiar with raise parameter in JavaScript, it allowed us to like spread the parameter and create a new object based on an existing one, right? So in V8, they really optimize for that spread operator. So basically, when you like pass the spread operator, it run very fast, like 1,000 million operation per second or something like that on my machine, which is like happen in M1 Max. But when I do the same on JavaScript core, it run just like a 10 million. So there's like 100 times different on very simple thing like copying the object and then create some object over it. So when I first found this, I actually very shocked because like I tend to use this object spread all the time when I was working on my daily job. But and then I use the same pattern in my framework. So when I run this on Bun, it is kind of like I have like some question why it was very slow. So I have to like do a lot of micro optimization like to test some case like this. And then we like have some kind of weird thing a lot of weird code happen that looks something like this. It looks very simple, but it actually have a lot of different performance on different JavaScript runtime.
I have to say that one of my favorite quotes in the context of micro benchmarks and micro optimizations is lies, damn lies, and micro optimizations. Um, because it's really really difficult to properly um, test micro optimizations for JavaScript engines because, like AJ said, the engines kind of optimize things over time and they can make all sorts of sophisticated decisions like identifying variant code in loops and do all sorts of things. And then you think that you're benchmarking one thing, but in fact, you're benchmarking something that's totally different than what you think your code actually does. So it can be really difficult to properly do these optimizations. But you're correct that like when you're like optimizing for code that gets reused so many times in a server environment, it can make a significant difference. Which brings me to my other point, where people forget that while all these JavaScript engines, be they V8 or JavaScript Core or SpiderMonkey or whatever, they all adhere to the same standard, but they're like totally different implementations. And the developers, like you said, they optimize different things or for different scenarios, or they place their focus in other places. So it's not really that surprising that code that might run really efficiently in one engine might run a lot less efficiently in another, or vice versa. So it's really interesting that you found that the spread operator for arguments is really not that optimized in JavaScript core. Obviously, it might change in a future version. They might come out with a new version of JavaScript core where it's much better optimized. So yeah, these things do change over time. And that's also important to remember. Interesting. So basically, what did you do? Did you just avoid it? Did you use the arguments object instead? Like, what did you do when you saw that you got such bad performance with the spread operator in that scenario?
So there's two cases that I use spread operator. The first one was to create a new object and then add some property over it, but sometimes it doesn't have to be copy. So when I instead of doing spread operator, I use direct assign to the object if it doesn't have to be a new one. So if it doesn't have any reference at all. And the second thing that I does to handle the to like shallow copy the object, I use object assign instead on JavaScript core. It is like faster than spread by like 5 times than spread on JavaScript core. So that's how it
Oh,
is.
so object assign instead of spread.
Yes.
Interesting, because you would think that they would do more or less the same thing. So it's really interesting that they don't. But it's also interesting because AJ, I unfortunately I didn't participate in that episode where you interviewed the creator of Bun, Jared Sumner, right? That's his name. And it's interesting because it seems that there's a lot of commonality here of really optimizing each and every line of code to try to squeeze out the most performance that you can get. So it's really interesting to see that this project has the kind of the similar philosophy to the Bun runtime itself.
I just want to clarify something real quick. This does it run on Node.js or does it only run on Bun? It sounded like it's optimized for Bun, but
Yeah, we have a plugin for converting the web standard into the node and then back and forth as I mentioned
okay.
on the first one. So we have plugin for that. Yes.
Okay. So you've mentioned the winter CG and some of the optimizations you've made. Um so have you more or less I have to say I haven't done a ton with Express, but it looks a bit different from what I've seen of Express. So how did you decide what approach you wanted to take for things like, routing and, returning HTML and JSON and whatever else you've got it able to do?
Mhm. So I want to make the backend framework to just like return it up just to return a value and then that return value gets sent into the user gets sent to user or client. So how Express work is that you get some context and then call like respond.send and then you send something, or if you want to send JSON you have to like call the respond.json and then pass the JSON into there. But in Elysia I actually want to just like return the object just like normal function and then pass it into the client. And in the client we have a custom client for like TRPC to to get the value of the function. So if you manage to make the server behave just like normal function and then client call the function and get the return value instead of doing response.json, using the return keyword is like very familiar to normal are very familiar to front end developer because when you say that it is a function, they don't expect the response to be something like response.json or response.send. They expect it to be a value, and then when you use it on the client, when you see the server code, when front end developers see the server code, they just know that, oh, okay, this function, this endpoint return a function. So it's just like normal value there. The second thing is that when you use respond.json, TypeScript can't invert the return type from there. So on the client side, we have a custom library for calling the fetch for like something like TRPC, right? If you have ever curious why TRPC doesn't use something like respond.json or respond.send, it is because that when you are using that same syntax, you can't infer type from the server. So you are forced to return the value as a literal value instead of like wrapping it into the function. So two key away two key away two key takeaway here is the first one is that TypeScript doesn't like response function. The TypeScript want you to return a value as a value to get the inferred type. The second thing is I want to make it familiar with front-end developers. So when you want to return a response, you just return a value and then it get converted into a response.
So again, I'd like to kind of decompose that into two parts. So the first part is that you chose a simple API over, let's say, compatibility with Express. So your intention was not to create a library that is as compatible as possible, let's say, with Express, but rather one that's kind of similar to Express, but intentionally not compatible in order to be easier to use and promote certain good programming practices. So that's part number one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the second part is, and it's kind of really highlighted also on the project's homepage, is that you really wanted to focus on type safety and strict typing so that as much as possible, like you said, you can infer the types from the actual return value from the server side function. And then on the client side, if you want, you can import those types and make and get type safety across the wire. Now, just to clarify that, to make sure that I understand, you don't have to use this type safety, right? At the end of the day, it's just a standard HTTP response. So if I'm using just a regular old, web client, like if I hit the URL in the browser address line, it'll just work. It'll just get a JSON response with the appropriate values. So I don't have to use the type safety. It's a benefit and a feature that I can use the type safety if I want to, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Now, this is kind of reminiscent of the conversation we recently had in an episode that just came out at the time of this recording about where we discussed the use of RPC in modern meta frameworks, like in Next.js version 14, or in Quick, or in Solid, where you call functions across the wire and you get type safety provided by the meta framework that you're using. So for example, if you're using Next.js 14, you create a function, you put in it use server, then you can call it from the client, and it behaves like a function call and it's type safe all the way, but it's not really a URL. You're literally calling a function. It gets translated into a URL behind the scenes. In your case, it's not that. It's similar to that, but it's not that. It has a URL. It has a standard HTTP return value. It's not like masquerading as something else, but you still get the type safety, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And the type safety on the client side is provided by a library that you're using, correct? Which library is it?
Yeah. It is called Eden. It is sub plugin of in the Elysia home pages. If you go to the plugin, it is listed as the first plugin for this exact purpose. Yes.
Is it like a project that you chose, or is it like something that you already also worked on, or like what's the relationship between Eden and because it kind of both of them reference an Eden, so I'm wondering if it's like something that you also created.
Yes, it is something that I also created.
Oh, cool. So you built Elysium on top of Eden in a lot of ways.
Mhm. So actually, I first create Elysia, and then I found that maybe it is good if you can do something like gRPC for the server. So
Hmm.
I create Eden for that.
I understand. It's kind of similar to Zod in a lot of ways, though, isn't it?
Mm, so sort is for validating the API, right? So instead of using sort, I actually use something called typebox, which is kind of like sort, but it was like a lot faster, like 100 times faster, something like that.
Wow.
So typebox is similar to Zod in that you can specify schema in, well, TypeScript, and then that schema becomes type safe. So it's a type safe way to send data across the wire. And you built Eden on top of that to infer the types from the return values in Elysia. And okay, now I see what you're getting. So, and effectively kind of constructed sort of a TRPC sort of a thing out of all these moving parts.
Yes.
By the way, I have to mention that on your homepage, you have at the bottom, you have a really nice playground. So anybody who's listening to this podcast and finding it difficult to kind of like follow along, they should just go to the ElysiaJS.com, scroll to the bottom, and have this kind of interactive playground that they can use.
Yep.
I do
So
not see an interactive playground. I see a start in minutes and an introduction and a cheat sheet.
No, there's a
Oh,
try
the try it out, not at the very bottom.
exactly.
Okay, okay.
Ah,
Alright,
so you went even lower. Yeah, it's almost at the very bottom. Yes.
okay, yeah. So I had a few questions here. One of them was, uh, how do you deal with headers and streams? Because I think that's the main thing that is not, you can't return, well, I guess you could have some way that you return headers as part of your return object, but then streams are also, if you're streaming some data rather than providing the object whole, what's the story for that?
Mhm. So for stream, you can actually return the stream, right? So you have to create something called like uh what is it called, erasing or something like that in Node.js. But in order to make that work as like normal value, we create some plugin called Elysia Stream, which allow you to create a new class. And then when you want to return a stream, you call some send method. So that is the only case that you have to use the send instead of return the value. But
Yeah.
so that's
And
that's it.
honestly, I can't think of a reason that you would ever use a stream in a web framework in production, because typically you're just sending a file, and if you're sending a file, then your web server would send the file. Oh, when you got to do generative stuff like creating a CSV or a PDF or something like that on the fly, that's the case for
And you kind of
using.
answered how I would do it in an ideal world. I don't know how difficult it would be to implement in a framework like this, especially given that I've never done it. But like you said, AJ, it's generative. So I would gravitate towards generators as a way to do it. Instead of returning a values, I would yield values.
Get the hints. Get the hints.
But
Where's my
that's
holy
that.
water?
Yeah, but that's what it was. That's what it was created for, really.
Oh, it was created to confuse people and sound cool.
It doesn't have to be difficult, really. It's more scary than it seems once you get used to it. But again, it seems to fit the case exactly. Like every time you have more content, you yield some more stuff.
Well, there was another question that I
Well,
had.
but wait, is it
Oh,
before you switch over? Is that something that you might consider? Either doing some sort of either generator or maybe a synchronous returning in a synchronous iterator or something along these lines?
Actually, I actually first consider to use the yield keyword and generator function, because in the client library I actually prototype some response for handle the stream. So basically when you call uh, fetch method in JavaScript, right? You call JSON and then you get the result right away. But when you call but when the response is a stream, you can't do that, because if you do that, it is going to block the response until all the stream is over. So
Hmm.
actually I implement an async iterator over that, and I actually also want to implement that on the server as well, because uh to sync the API to like make them behave the same. But I actually asked a lot of people, and then uh, as many people said, they are kind of afraid of the generator function and yield keyword in general. So
Good.
for
Good.
now, I am going to implement the same, and then I will implement the yield keyword later. So we are going to support two ways to do this.
I think, like I said, I totally understand why people are scared of it. But on the other hand, I think it's a lot, when done correctly, it's a lot simpler than people really worry about. It's almost magic in how simple it can be. There are potentially some issues with it. Like, I don't know what the performance will be. So, given your performance focus, it really depends how efficiently the engine actually implements all these mechanisms, and it can vary a lot. Another potential issue to look at is the push pull program problem, like how you deal with congestion. Like, you know you basically want the client to be able to pull stuff, and you don't want to create congestion on the server side. It's an interesting question how you control the flow in these types of scenarios.
Well, unfortunately, this is the time of year for congestion and colds and stuff, so hopefully there's some good code medicine for it.
So speaking of congestion, uh, there was one thing I meant to ask earlier, but I realized I was on mute. So we were talking about the performance, and we're talking about these micro benchmarks, and Deanna was talking about how there's lies, damn lies, and micro benchmarks or whatever it was. And so you're showing here that I'm assuming that these requests are like it returns the string hello world or something. So, we've got Express can only do 15,000 a second, but Elysia can do 200, a quarter million, can do a quarter million requests per second. But uh, the two concerns I have are, one, this is being benchmarked on an Intel i7, which is nowhere close to what you're going to have in a deployment environment. You're going to be dealing with a 500 megahertz single thread, no hyper threading, or I guess not single thread, but single active thread, no hyper threading environment, which is going to be very different than a desktop that has 8 cores available or whatever, and has full hyperthreading available to it. So there's that, and then there's also I don't know how much of this is we're measuring overhead and how important that overhead is, because if I'm returning hello world, then all I'm measuring is the functions and the overhead of the framework. But that may not matter in production, because if I'm returning an API response, the overhead of JSON.stringify on, a kilobyte of JSON might be so much that if we were to run this benchmark in that type of environment, maybe Express and Elysia are only, a hair's width apart once there's actually any of the work that you actually do in your application. So, and then I did also look up, there's a web frameworks benchmark, and on this one it has surprisingly a few JavaScript benchmarks at the top, and then a bunch of Go frameworks, and then a few more JavaScript frameworks, and then a few more Go, and then And then down at the very, very bottom, the fourth one from the bottom is Elysia, and it's showing that it's, only getting a little over 10,000 requests per second, whereas it's showing that Express is getting almost 2.5 times that. So what do these benchmarks actually say for an actual application versus it just looks cool to put on the homepage and draws in some hype?
Okay, sure. I got this question a lot. So they are the benchmark for the web framework, right? So actually they create an issue on Elysia side. On our repo, you can go find the issue there. The maker of this benchmark request me to have something called like a code review for what they are doing for Elysia and Bond as well. uh, Actually, if you go back to that benchmark in a month ago, around what does it call? The 9 month in English. What does it call? Around before October, there is a benchmark that run on Elysia, and Elysia was performing around 100,000, which is around level of Go and Rust. If you could click on the top of the pages, you can see that you can scroll back into the date that they did before. If you scroll back to the date that they did before, you can see that uh, most framework that run on Barn like Elysia and Hono, they are performing very very good, like 100,000 requests per second. But at some point they actually change some configuration of the Docker file. So how this web framework testing are that they pack the runtime and the code into the Docker file, and then they execute the code. But the problem is that when they create an issue for that when they create an issue on Elysia repo, they are using PM2 without without doing the multi-process work. So what you are seeing
Right.
now at the benchmarking at the benchmark website, they are actually running on single thread. So that is why Elysia are down to that level, because other run other node run other framework like Express and Pacify, they are using multiple process to run to do the benchmark. And for Bun, like framework like Elysia and Hono, which for some reason behave like quite slow recently, because that they are changing because they change the Docker file or some configuration or some hardware that I am not aware of. But I actually create an issue for that on their
Okay.
report, fix that, and I am taking a look into that issue. So I can assure you that previously, around a month or 2 months ago, Elysia
Yeah.
and Hono are performing a lot faster than it is now. So
So
they
I
might
I
be some.
I do see that October 3rd. I look at the October 3rd benchmarks and I see that there, Elysia is about 5 times faster than Express and whatever this benchmark is, which, who knows what that is. But yeah, that was exactly my question is, like the benchmark here, this is multi-threaded, multi-core versus an actual deployment environment. If you're measuring wide, it's different than if you're horizontal measuring is different than vertical measuring. Here you're doing vertical measuring. There they're doing kind of a hybrid. They're doing horizontal measuring, but only measuring one instance of the horizontal measuring, whereas you are doing vertical measuring. So yeah, okay. That makes sense. So, but in practice, with an actual application, if you implement, let's say, a to-do app, well, I don't know if that's even really enough, but let's, if it's a to-do app that connects to the database and has some items, if you have some application implemented in both Express and in Elysia, what do you think is the real difference in performance? And is that even like as big of a deal? Because again, you could just go with Go if you were really concerned about performance, or Rust if you're hyper concerned about performance.
Mhm. So About Elysia, so we have like if you do something like the to do like some simple to do list for this case, they if you compare it to Node, like express and falsify, they are not going to have like a lot of different like 10 times different. It is not that case because they are if you do like something like database calling, they are going to have some overhead over there too. So they can never like get up to like 10 times faster or 20 times faster. They never did that with uh in the real world with database calling or something like that. But if you do something in memory, like maybe
which is your edge functions, your winter CG stuff.
yes,
Or
they
just using Redis.
yes, or Redis as well. They are going to perform a lot faster because first, in the edge in edge function, they are using JavaScript core, and then the code that we are making are actually very optimized for JavaScript core. Actually, Elysia has something like fake compiler that takes your code and generate the new code on the fly to remove any overhead that it could have or that
Wow,
or something
that's
like
awesome.
that. And
So yeah,
then
so before we get to that, and I will want to get to that, I just wanted to also respond to you, AJ, in this context, because first of all, you know, as a person that deals a lot in performance, I can tell you that performance is a concern, but rarely the main concern. So it's not like people say, oh, performance is the most important thing, so I'm going to choose Go over JavaScript. They choose Go or JavaScript based on a variety of concerns in which performance might be one of them, probably should be one of them, but mostly they need performance to be good enough rather than to be, the most performant solution possible.
Mhm.
So they might prefer to use JavaScript because, I don't know, maybe it means that it's easier for them to move developers between the front end and the back end, or because the person who did the initial implementation for the startup like JavaScript, or maybe they like JVM, or maybe they like Go. So, they make whatever technical choices they make, but they just need to know that they're not going to dig themselves into a hole, let's say performance wise or scalability wise.
Right.
So
And by the way, this does on the benchmark that I'm looking at from October, this actually outperforms the framework I use in Go and a number of other popular frameworks in Go. So just
yeah,
just to just to clarify that when I said Go might be faster, according to these benchmarks, most of the Go frameworks are actually slower than Elysia.
and the other thing is that if you're looking currently in at the edge function world, that's almost by definition like it's going to be node, well, not node based, but
JavaScript based.
JavaScript based, or maybe WebAssembly, but probably JavaScript based. So that's certainly an interesting use case for that scenario, and especially on the edge, you probably want the fastest thing possible because that's why you're using the edge in the first place. No.
I think you're using the edge in the first place because it's really cool right now.
Yeah, that's probably true. We had a whole episode where we had Gal Schlesinger from Versailles, and like the whole episode I was trying to get him to say like what was the killer app for Edge, and I don't recall that I got an answer. Of,
Investor money. Investor money is the killer app.
yeah, probably.
Anyway,
Um, yeah. So what I'm getting is that here is a really nice to use library that's an alternative to Express, that in a lot of ways has a much simpler API. It's type safe across the wire, and it also happens to be a lot faster. Now you put faster at the top because it's sexy, but for me it's more of the like the icing on the cake in a lot of ways.
so basically because like a lot of a lot of developers say that Node is slow, so I kind of want to destroy that pressing. So that's why I put the performance on the top, because it catch a lot of eye easier than saying I have something like maybe Open API support or something like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
But are
And
your benchmarks running on Bun or are they running on Node?
the benchmark is running on Bun, but
Yeah.
for Express we also have Bun version and Node version as well.
Okay.
so all the tests that you're showing are on Bun, correct?
There's some runtime. There's some other framework like for Hono, they actually work with a lot of runtime like Bun and Deno as well. So I kind of run on the other runtime as well. If the framework support, so there's like Express on the Bun and Express on Node, or Hono on Deno or Hono on Bun, and then compare the performance difference.
I hope I don't get hate for this. We actually even use Nest at Next Insurance where I work, and I really don't get the like why people like it so much. I'm not a Nest person. Maybe it's I'm not big into decorators. Maybe it's that.
Maybe we need to get Kent on to talk about why we'll never use Nest. He wrote a blog post about that.
Well, he
Anyway.
spoke about why you should never use Next, not why you
Next.
should never use Nest.
Not no, right. Yeah, you are correct. I mixed them up.
Yeah.
So are you saying Nest is for the birds then?
Yeah, maybe. I don't get the appeal, but maybe it's just me. But again, so going back to Elysia, so we said it's potentially like 18 times, let's say an order of magnitude faster than Express, and let's say several times faster than Fastify. So if you're concerned about performance, you've got that covered. It's got a much simpler API, at least for the non-streaming scenario. It's type safe. Oh, and I see that it's also Open API compliant.
And that's just the new name for Swagger, right?
Yes, actually is the standard for that Swagger built on, but mostly we use Open
It's
API
the
for
standard
Swagger.
that they retroactively built it on after they turned it into the standard.
Yes, but it is nice to have, because like on my previous work that I was done with like freelancing, I was using Fastify, and it is very hard to get it work with Swagger and make it work with TypeScript. So when I had to change the schema, I had to change it on both TypeScript and change it on the Fastify schema, and then change it on validation library. So I have to change a lot of that, and there are like a lot of frequent change. So I try to make it like defined by using one single schema, which is the type box that I was using, and then it does support the OpenAPI schema to generate Swagger as well. So that is really nice to have uh to let the manager or senior programmer see that what are you working on or something like that.
So, and how do you deal with headers? I don't think we actually rounded that question out.
Yes. So for headers, there are when if you are familiar with Code.js, when you get a request and response, everything is done through context. So there's two cases. If you want to set the header, you can use the context.set.headers to append the value to the header. The second one is that you can explicitly return something called new response, and that class is a standard that built into Windows CG standard. So you kind of get that for free. So, and if you want to return a value, the second parameter of the constructor, they accept something called headers, and then you can pass the headers to that as well. but you can choose return each one if each one you like. But the good thing about Elysia is that Elysia try to, like, if you are working with cores or something like that, you don't have to explicitly set the headers because like plugin already set it there for you.
And so how does it know? Well, I mean, generally you're returning JSON. I mean, like 99% of the time you're returning JSON. But if you did need to return text or HTML, or does it do some sort of peeking at the content when it's non-object content, non-object, non-stream, to be able to tell what type it is? Or is it JSON by default? Like if I just had a stream and you didn't know what was in the stream, what would the header be?
Actually we in Elysia, when you return the value, it actually pass to some function called map handler to map that value into web standard response. So what we did is that we try to find what is the most common case that developer tend to return. Like if they are return text with the HTML, which with HTML value, they Elysia automatically set the response to be automatically set the content type to be HTML. If the value is a JSON, they automatically set to JSON. And if it is a file, like you get it, like there are a lot of cases that we try to like automate. But you can
So
also,
are you saying at runtime it looks at the data and whatever that function returns, it memoizes the type and then just returns that type? Is that what you're saying?
actually we do both. We as I said before, HC actually have a fake compiler to detect the return type and return value. But in case that it can't detect the value, they are trying to interpret as on the fly.
And what
Interesting.
if I want to just add, I don't know, let's say a cache response header, something that doesn't have to do specifically with the content type, but rather just extra information on top?
Mhm. If you want to add some manual header, you can set a header based on context and context.header, which is passed to every handler in the.
Okay. So in addition to the return value, if I want to provide some additional metadata, I can do it via a context object that's an optional parameter to my handler, as it were.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Um, I assume you can also use that to do stuff like, I don't know, like a 304 response instead of sending all the data down again or something along these lines or so, you know. Um, and again, it all works really well with the bun really fast system for, let's say, manipulating files and so forth. So I really like the combination of these things together. But I know that it's not necessarily AJ's jam, but I really like the type safety across the wire. The fact that you you can post JSON data and get a build time error if you're passing in an improperly constructed object is really powerful.
I love type safety. I love type safety. I hate
Oh,
TypeScript.
yeah, that's the thing. It's TypeScript based. You can't get away from it in this
I don't
context.
see any TypeScript here.
Yes, well,
I'm looking at the cheat sheet. I don't see any TypeScript.
no,
This all looks
but again,
very
if
same.
you go to the homepage and you search for type
Let me
strict,
go back.
actually you go to end-to-end type safety. Introducing end-to-end type safety, you will see that it passes a string age instead of a numeric age, and you get a type error at build time.
Yes, but that if you pull that up, there's no TypeScript there. That's using the uh I forget what it was called, but
Well, yeah, it's
the type object, the t.object, t.string,
yeah,
t.number.
but again, it's a type object, but that's why I said that it's like Zod, because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it does the type checking. You do both at build time and at runtime.
No, I'm 100% on board with this. This is JavaScript. It's easy to read. There's no extra syntax to learn. No, I'm 100% on board with this.
Oh, you mean the fact that you write t dot number instead of doing the explicit typing? That's the thing that you like?
Well, no, I'm. It's not that I like it. I'm just on board with it. I don't dislike it. So I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
saying I'm not saying I want all my code to look like this. I'm saying this doesn't bother me. This is straight JavaScript. There's no magic here. I like JS doc. Well, kind like I use JS doc to get my type safety. I use the TypeScript checker. I use JS doc. I don't see any JS doc here. I don't see any TypeScript here, but this type safety is sane. It's easy to read, it's easy to write, it's intuitive. I don't think that
With
anybody would come across this, whatever their background is, and think, oh, this is difficult. Like this is intuitive. You would be productive with this in a matter of seconds. Like
but
you don't.
but the nice thing is that because of the way that tools like VS Code work, even if it was like client.js instead of client.ts, you could still probably get the type checking to work.
So
So
it's I was going to call you salty because that's your first part of your handle there. But
yeah.
hold on. Let me. It's just right?
Yes, yes, it is
Okay, okay. So do you have uh compatibility with JSDoc, or uh, can the type checking does the type checking work with just regular JavaScript and JSDoc? I do notice now it shows that this file ends in .ts, but I don't see any TypeScript here. This all looks like regular JavaScript to me.
Mhm. Uh, Actually, I am not sure if it work with JSDoc. If it is working with JSDoc, because if it is typed as TypeScript and then you add the explicit type, it is going to favor the TypeScript type over the JSDoc, if I remember correctly. So I'm not sure in that case. But if you try to type it in JavaScript in .js file, it should work as well. But
Okay.
I don't actually recommend that, because uh Elysia does a lot of typing magic to make it work that way.
It
So
should
so
it
it
should
is
work. It should work, AJ. It just might not be as nice.
so it's preferred that you don't use JavaScript with this framework, but you use TypeScript.
Mm,
If
not
you
not
want a type safety, you don't
not
have to
ex-
have the type safety.
not exactly. You can actually use Elysia with JavaScript, and then you can still get the type safety, if but it is not as it will not be as good as TypeScript, because it like Elysia does like have like 1,000 line of TypeScript to make that work, to make all the thing be inferred, and then you don't have to ever write type manually. So, but if you are using JSDoc, and then you documented it line by line, it should work, but
Do
not.
you have this is the thing. Do you have custom tooling, or are you using TSC?
We are using purely TSC. Actually, I wrote a lot of TypeScript type. So I actually wrote some compiler base for GraphQL in type level 2, or something like that, or some tool like that, and then I use that experience to make the same thing with the Elysia.
Okay, so if it works with TSC, it'll work in Elysia.
Yes.
Okay, all right, yeah. So then JSDoc will work. Okay, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, I hate TypeScript. I think it's just so much complexity. It's like you got to have a computer science degree to use TypeScript. You could be an idiot and use JavaScript like you wouldn't go.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I like to, and it's a bit of an aside, and I apologize for that, but still, TypeScript is kind of like herding cats. because JavaScript is like the poster child for dynamically typed languages, kind of like Ruby in that regard. It's like really carefree and wild about how it uses types, and TypeScript really tries to wrangle that and make it possible to get all the JavaScript expressiveness with type safety. So you're going to get a lot of complexity in TypeScript in order to try to achieve something like that. Uh, Most TypeScript developers don't really need to deal with all this sophistication. It's mostly for library builders, people like Ohm, who want to introduce type safety in this way. I'm guessing you did a lot of sophisticated TypeScript coding, which was really far from trivial, and kudos for that. But most, run-of-the-mill TypeScript developers never need to deal with such sophisticated complexity.
All right, I'm going to push us to picks. I will also say that I like the Wild West of the type system in Ruby. But yeah, let's jump in and do some picks. Before we do that, though, how do people find you online?
Oh yeah. I do have a Twitter account which have the same name as here. SaltyAom. You can find me on there, or otherwise you can go into Elysia, and then you can go to Elysia GitHub. There are links to my GitHub profile as well. But mostly for programming stuff, I usually active on Twitter mostly.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do our picks. Steve, do you want to start us off with a high point of the episode?
Absolutely. All right. So still missing my rim shots. We got to get that figured out, Chuck.
Yeah.
So in the past I've talked about all the different jobs I've had and how I got fired, like when I used to work for the bank and got fired by pushing an old lady over when she asked me to check her balance. One point I used to work for the circus, and I was a human cannibal until they fired me. Right. And then recently, I bought a chicken to make a sandwich. Turns out it just poops all over the floor and doesn't make sandwiches at all. Right. And then
You do need your rim shots. I'm sorry.
I do. I really need them. And then
Yeah, this is
I
almost sad without the rim shots.
almost, almost. And then I burned. I'm working on losing a little weight, and I burned 2,000 calories yesterday. I left my food in the oven for too long. So.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's
I
like
feel
have
like
to get
I'm doing this, right?
I'll have to get a sound effect on my phone and hold it up or something, right?
Yeah.
Those are my picks.
All right. Dan, what are your picks?
Well, given the realities on the ground here, my main pick this week is going to be the anti-missile defense system that we've got going here in Israel. Just to give it to put it in numbers, since this conflict began, Hamas has fired, and I'm excluding Hezbollah in the north. Just Hamas has fired close to 10,000 rockets at Israel's
Holy
population
cow.
at Israel's population centers. So they're intentionally trying to hit our cities, like Tel Aviv or the more southern cities of Ashkelon and Ashdod have suffered a lot of rocket attacks. And what makes it, you know, being basically livable here in Israel is the fact that we've got an amazing rocket defense system. It's actually three layered. We've got the Iron Dome as like the layer that deals with the lower flying rockets. You've got David Sling, which deals with the mid-range systems, and then you've got the Arrow, which is for ballistic missiles, and which was actually used for the first time
Saw that.
in a combat scenario, not an experiment or something like that, when the Houthis in Yemen actually
Mhm.
fired the rocket at Eilat. So it was actually intercepted by an arrow missile. Now, I was actually when I was in the army a long time ago. I was actually involved in the development of these systems, so I feel an extra level of gratitude and appreciation for what they've been able to achieve with these systems. It's pretty incredible. Um, so that would be my pick. By the way, if there's one part of our economy that's like benefiting from all this is the defense industries, because there a lot of countries are now looking to buy these defense systems because they've just proven themselves incredibly well in these times. So that would be my pick. Other than that, you know, the war is still ongoing, and even after all these times, we still get like more information and more videos and whatnot about what happened on October 7th. It's actually I actually watched a video that was released online. I saw that you also favored it, Steve. I kind of wished I didn't watch it after watching it
Is
because it
that the
was,
one with the girl?
yes,
Yeah, that's pretty
yeah,
amazing. Sickening is
amazing.
more like it. I
Yeah,
think is a
it's
better word.
it's it's pretty hard. It kind of scars your soul when you see stuff like that.
Mm.
It's really difficult.
Yeah, that's what
Uh,
happens when you treat human life as disposable. I mean, as with no value.
yeah. Anyway, it is what it is. So the war in Israel, the ongoing war in Ukraine, which people tend to kind of ignore now, there's actually a lot of stuff that people are kind of ignoring because of the war here. Like there's something that's on the verge of genocide in Darfur going on right now, and nobody's talking about it um, because nobody cares about them apparently, and whatnot. So yeah, sorry, those are my sad picks for today, and I apologize for that. And try to. Oh, how can I forget? Just when you think that all the world is doom and gloom, then you've got some comic relief, like what's happening with OpenAI and Microsoft. Uh, have you been following this? This is pretty nuts.
It's head spinning just watching all the moves and who's doing
So
what.
a
And
really fast recap: the board fired Sam Altman for no obvious or apparent reason, like overnight, as it were, for failing to disclose some unspecified information to the board. They literally informed Microsoft, who was the biggest shareholder in OpenAI, like a minute before the firing. So they literally didn't give them any time to respond to that. Microsoft stock then lost 4%, which is quite a lot given the size of that company.
Mhm.
And then they appointed the CTO to be the interim CEO instead of Sam Altman. I forget her name. Uh, and the
Mia
fir-
something, yeah.
and the first thing she tried to do is to hire him back. So the board fired her as well. And
Oh,
then they
that's why.
brought,
I didn't realize that. I saw that she had been made CEO. I didn't understand that was why she'd been let go.
yeah, something along these lines. So, and then they brought in somebody else from the outside. And then, like on a Sunday night at midnight, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, basically tweets that first of all, we will work with the new management team at OpenAI, but we are hiring Sam Altman to be the CEO of our new AI division inside Microsoft, and he's bringing over everybody from OpenAI. So,
Uh,
uh,
not I don't know if it's everybody, but
well, not all the good
yeah,
people.
well,
That is the
yeah, well,
weirdest acquisition I've ever heard of.
Yeah, so some people are now speculating that maybe Microsoft instigated all this thing just to, not be dependent on OpenAI as an external provider and just bring everything in-house. Um, by the way, what is Microsoft stock doing today
I would
after these?
I
Well, it's up 2.5% almost. So yeah, so apparently the market likes that news. Anyway, it's the weirdest thing. Some people are actually speculating that maybe they're kind of grooming Sam Altman to replace Satya Nadella eventually.
Oh,
Like,
geez.
Mm,
That would,
I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, it's funny times, so at least I'm finishing with an upbeat pick. So yeah,
Yeah, I
those
just
would
caught
be.
the tail end of that on Twitter
Oh yeah,
last night.
you've got to love Elon Musk's response to Satya Nadella's tweet about this, basically saying that now Sam Altman and his team will have to use Teams for their online
yes.
conferencing.
Oh, that was so
Poor
good.
souls. All right, AJ, what are your picks?
All right. So, first and foremost, metal shower head. So, I don't know how many people have this problem. It seems like anybody who buys a shower head with a plastic shower head holder would have this problem. But because the shower heads, they, ah, and then the plastic pieces break, right? And then, so anyway, we bought a metal shower head holder, and the thing was like almost the same price as a new shower head, but now we'll never have to buy another one ever again. And it even came with the Teflon tape that you need to make it so it goes on smooth and doesn't have any leaks and stuff. So yeah, so metal shower head holder. I don't know why I didn't buy one of these months and months ago, because ours has been broken for a long time and we just kind of like have it balancing in the shower just right. And then, but the thing is, because it's not a standard size, I like was really demotivated to go look for one, because and of course the company that we bought the shower head from, they don't have replacement parts, So anyway, but we got this. I think it's like the only all metal shower head that's available for purchase on Amazon. It's I think $27, but totally worth it. And no, it doesn't fit perfectly because there are no standard sizes for these things, but it fits good enough. It's not like it's not going to fall out. It just doesn't have that perfect look of shoop, fits all the way in. So that's one. Number two, that should be number one, is Super Mario RPG, because it's the best game ever. I mean, it rivals Link's Awakening, maybe surpasses it. I don't know. That's a tough call. Um, but
I'm going to interrupt you for a second and just say that I have to drop off. So bye bye to everybody, and really thank you for coming on. It was super interesting, and it looks like a really great project, and all the best with it. So bye everybody.
so Super Mario RPG, right? Just so good, very faithful adaptation. I'm really upset that they did it in, I think it was Unreal rather than a custom engine that's for the Switch, because the performance is terrible. There are tons of places, especially in the very beginning, where there's lots of uh like, I don't know if cutscene's the right word. It's kind of like cutscene, but where there's weird frame skips and stuff. That just hurts my heart, because for a lot of reasons. Why like yeah, but okay, that only affects you for like the first 2 minutes of the cutscenes, and then every once in a while it's noticeable. And I just feel like a game this simple, that literally they brought Super Mario RPG essentially up to GameCube style graphics, and I don't know why that can't run on the Switch perfectly at a measly 30 frames per second, but whatever. But it's a faithful adaptation. The music is so close that I really almost can't tell the difference between switching between classic music and modern music. I mean, obviously, the modern music is a little bit smoother, but the classic music was so daggone good. I mean, they really did a great job on the Super Nintendo to get that music to feel so full and robust. And yeah, it's just nice to be able to play. I don't have to run an emulator on my GameCube to play Super Mario RPG anymore, which I wasn't really going to do anyway, because now that we have LCD rather than CRT, when you play those Super Nintendo isomorphic games, like Super Mario RPG is the only one that comes to mind. But trying to play an isomorphic, is that what it's called, isomorphic, or is it the anyway, the style of artwork that Super Mario RPG is, is torturous to try to play on a modern TV through emulation on a GameCube or Xbox or whatever. So I'm glad that they came out with it. Super excited to play it with my 4-year-old, and she, she's having so much fun with it. She put Mario up on a spinning flower and then just left him there to watch him spin around. And then he got dizzy and fell off. And I don't know if I knew that he would do that. And there's, it's just such a fun children's game. There's, if you're a kid like my 4-year-old and you do the things a 4-year-old would do, you make all these interesting discoveries about the world. And so, yeah, I love Super Mario RPG. It is, it's a tie between that and Link's Awakening as to which is my favorite game of all time. Link's Awakening was super challenging, great story. Super Mario RPG is just so fun and lighthearted and great characters, just so enjoyable. And then I'm also going to pick, moving on, the Primogen, because there was a JavaScript Jabber episode that made it into one of his reactions because I skipped a sentence when I said something, and then Lane didn't understand what I had said, who was our guest that week. And then anyway, there was this little bit of miscommunication about Go routines, and then he ended up picking it up, and then a bunch of people referred me to that, and everything that he said was absolutely correct given the 30 seconds of the clip that he watched. Because if you actually backed up or knew that this was a JavaScript podcast and that it was Go routines in compared to JavaScript, not Go routines in compared to Python, but Go routines, because Go routines compared to JavaScript async, not Go routines compared to no async. Anyway, whatever. His takes were great, and I started watching other of his videos, and I love just about everything that he has to say. He's got that. He looks like a younger guy, but I think he might be older than he looks. Because at first I thought he was younger than me, but maybe he's even older than me. I don't know. But he has that wisdom of a seasoned developer, of having gone through the hype and then gone through, kind of scaling back to simplicity, and is kind of what wins. And so I love his takes. I've watched several of his reaction videos now, and 100%. My name is AJ O'Neill, and I endorse the Primogen.
Yeah, I just listened to him on another podcast. I think it was Whiskey Web and whatnot. Interesting to hear him talk. He's pretty sharp. It's fun to listen to.
Yeah, and he seems to have his hand in so many pots that sometimes I notice the thing that he says, it's that's not 100% technically accurate. But then again, I'm a person who skips an entire sentence while I'm thinking in my head and then move on to the next sentence without actually saying the thing that connects to the two sentences. So I've got no room to speak on that. And then lastly, I started writing my first Zig program, and I found that Zig is what Bun is written in. And Zig is almost at the level of Go. So you get kind of the performance of Rust, or, if we're going to talk dirty words, C or C++, right? But you get a lot of ergonomics and safety, not at the level of Rust, because it's meant to be far more ergonomic. Well, it's not meant to be more ergonomic than Rust. It just is more ergonomic than Rust. It's got there's a few unique features to it. Maybe I'll bring up another time when I pick just that. But I think that Zig is a language that you can be, if you've used other languages that do some form of memory management, like Rust or C, or just generally modern system level languages. Even if we want to put Go in that category, we could put Go in that category. But if you've used Rust, even to the point of being able to get just slightly beyond the hello world, or if you've used Go, I think that Zig is a language that you can learn in a week. So the Rust you can learn in a year, Zig you can learn in a week, Go you could learn in a weekend. That's kind of how I'd position them. The JavaScript you can learn in a lifetime if they ever stop changing the language, maybe. And I will say that I do believe I'm going to check out Elysia. I'm going to try not to get too excited about it, where I did with Fastify, where I was telling everybody this is the bee's knees, and then I got a little bit into it and realized, oh, this is just far too complicated for the small gains that you get. It's just not worth it. It has the appearance of being pretty simple. So I am interested to try out Elysia. I do have a project in mind that would be a good project to play with it with and see if it doesn't hurt me to use, which it looks like it won't hurt me to use. Looks like it might even help.
All right. I'm going to jump in with my picks here. I'm going to pick a board game first. Now, I've mentioned that I help teach games at TimCon in Provo, and this was one of the games we taught. This was not my favorite game, but it was fun. I kind of put it on the level of if somebody wanted to play it, I would say yes. But if somebody wanted me to pay for it, I would say no. Um, and it's called Astra. And what it is you have constellations, and you're trying to complete the constellations. And so they all have a starting star that you start on, and you trace out the constellation. Whoever finishes it gets constellation in their hand, and then you can use the constellation's ability to do different things. And so, and if you contribute to a constellation but you don't win it, then you get a one-time boon for completing it. And yeah, anyway, you can increase your capacity to um, cover more stars in the constellation. You can increase your capacity to um, hold more cards. Anyway, there are different things. It's relatively simple game. I think it took us about an hour to play it. And it has a board game geek weighting of 2.19. Um, and I went to try and find it on Amazon, and I didn't see it there. However, it is on Board Game Arena, so if you want to play it on the internet, you can do that. And I do not pay for my Board Game Arena account, and I play games on here semi frequently. So it looks like this one is a free game to play. So anyway, go ahead and check that out. Really digging that. I'm also going to throw in a couple more picks with some of the stuff that I'm fiddling with. One of them, I switched my error tracking over to honeybadger.io. And I've been pretty happy with that. And yeah, I've also been getting some feedback on top end devs on stuff that isn't quite working quite right on the website. So if you're running into that, let me know. And then finally, we are going to be releasing the premium podcasts and meetups and memberships. So keep an eye out for that on Top End Devs. And that's what I've got. What are your picks?
Just okay. I have one. So around like 2 days ago, I have Microsoft Thailand invite me to talk about GitHub and Elysia in general and about open source. So I actually make an appointment with Microsoft to talk about it, right? So I have to talk it on stages, but apparently there's a little bit of wrong mark in my calendar. So on that day, I have to speak at Microsoft GitHub Universe after party Thailand. But in that day in the morning, I have to went to the the other the other one. They are hosting a game event, which if you cosplay to their booth, they will give you a lot of nice stuff in return to like for like taking picture with people around there. So I plan to cosplay to the game booth to get the stuff, right? And then I realized that it is organizing in the same day. So I have to ask Microsoft if I could maybe using the cosplay costume to present at GitHub Universe Thailand. So apparently they allowed me to do it. So the unique thing is that this GitHub Universe are organizing in Siam. Siam is like the center of the Bangkok, where every station in Thailand are across there, and we are talking in like the biggest biggest shopping mall there. So there's like a lot of people walking around, and then there are like some people like, oh, they have some like cosplay on the stages, but they can't understand that at all because like we are talking about like programming stuff. And apparently after that, Microsoft employee uh actually DM me and say that maybe there's like a lot of clown uh actually really happy and participate more than more than usual. So apparently they also invite me to like another conference in the January, and they also asked me to do cosplay again to see if the clown actually like it or not. So just kind of funny story that I have. Yes.
Awesome. That sounds like fun. I love cosplay, honestly. It's fun, especially with my kids. My kids really dig it, so I'd love to give a talk in cosplay. Anyway, all right. Well, this was fun. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up. Thanks for coming.